We're live.
Great. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We're having some technical issues and we'll get started now. For the record, this meeting was convened with less than the 48 hours notice, but participation will be limited to essential personnel via teleconference due to the COVID-19 warnings concerning persons at risk in certain situations. Taking part in the meeting this morning via telecommunications will be Second Warden Andre Bujo, Councilors Martha Ball, Chris Willey, and Sven Rissam, Town Clerk Molly Fitzpatrick, Interim Town Manager Jim Kern, Town Solicitor Catherine Marola, Medical Director Mark Clark, EMA Directors Bill McComb, Peter Gemp, and Police Chief Vin Carlone, and also Building Official Mark Tilson is on with us. If someone would like to email any comments into the Town Clerk, and she will try to relay them if necessary, that would be townclerk@new-shoreham.com. That's townclerk@new-shoreham.com. We are being live streamed on Zoom. If you'd like to try to get on with live streaming with your computer, go to the town's website. That's new-shoreham.com, and the top news article will have the information on how to get on the live stream. We also are being streamed on the Black Island Times Facebook, I believe.
So on YouTube.
And YouTube, or YouTube. Furthermore, this meeting was called under the open meetings law as a result of the state of emergency declared by the president, as a result of the state of emergency declared by the governor, as a result of the state of emergency declared by the town of New Shoreham, and based on the CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health recommendations, members of the public will not be allowed to attend the meeting. We thank the Black Island Times again for providing the opportunity for streamed Facebook, and those members of staff who are facilitating the live streaming on Zoom today. As I usually do on a personal note, I just want to disclose I have a long existing esophageal issue and allergies which cause me to cough occasionally. I'm not experiencing any symptoms of other illness. If I do sense a coughing spell coming on, I may leave the meeting briefly, and Second Warden Andre Bujo will take over the duties as chair until I return. As always, I thank everyone for their indulgence. First item on the agenda is Warden's report. Actually, I'll make, before I go to Warden's report, I'll make a motion to hold a meeting to address an unexpected occurrence that requires immediate action to protect the public.
Second.
Seconded by Chris, was it?
Andre.
Andre, sorry, seconded by Andre. I'll take a roll call vote. Chris?
Aye.
Andre?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Sven?
Aye.
I vote aye. We have a unanimous vote to continue the meeting as described. Warden's report. I have a short statement on Warden's report. The New Shoreham Town Council would like to thank everyone for their attention, their patience, and their understanding, and their compliance during the first days of our COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, the council spent many hours trying to formulate a measured response to this pandemic that we felt would be in proportion to the threat level to the island community. Martha, could you mute? Thank you. So far, our actions and your cooperation have paid off, but we are not out of the woods yet, and it appears that the COVID-19 pandemic will be around for a while. Worsening conditions in nearby states have forced the state of Rhode Island to ramp up its response and enforcement. The town, Interstate Navigation, and New England Airlines have been waging an effective informational campaign via the internet, media, and handouts for a week or two. As we have done in our latest ordinance, the state has ordered a mandatory 14-day quarantine for those coming from out of state. Over the past few weeks, our emergency ordinance was resulting in some confusion, some concern, and even consternation. Understandable, since we asked most of you to change your lifestyle and your work activities just as the weather was improving, work sites were bustling, and the island was about to start another season. While it's difficult timing, we too want to do everything we can to salvage what we can of a summer season. And these weeks, we've been in contact with the governor's office, our EMA directors, and the medical center, trying to get a read on what to expect going forward. The governor has had an evolving response. through a series of executive orders, slowly shutting things down while trying to maintain limited economic activity. Her frustration with noncompliance has been apparent. On Block Island, given our limited medical resources, we tried a more aggressive approach to get a handle on the real and informed risks to our population regarding travel to and from the island, as well as certain everyday activities. The changes brought on by our emergency ordinance had a dramatic effect on the spread of the coronavirus to the island. Calibrated precautions and maintaining the current level of isolation from mainland sources will be critical for the near future at least. In addition, strict adherences to local distancing, quarantining, the wearing of masks in public and at work, and hand washing protocols as recommended by the CDC are critical for all of our efforts to have a chance of success. Travel to the island has been significantly curtailed, and a reduction of the plane and ferry schedule will help keep that activity level low. Limiting the workforce to essential services and activities has appropriately reduced person-to-person interactions and enhanced the new norm, spatial distancing. Takeout and curbside pickup only at the grocery store, the bank, and hardware stores, and other places have worked very well after working out some logistical problems. We thank everyone for their help and for their efforts, but remind them to stay vigilant, especially with the protocols of wearing masks and hand washing. One drawback, however, has been the restrictions on non-essential work activities, particularly in the construction trade. The council's received a lot of feedback about this, and it should be stated that our goal was not to create economic hardship, but rather to rapidly achieve a sheltered-in-place status for as many islanders as possible. It is still imperative for anyone who is sick in any way to stay home. It is imperative for any non-essential persons coming to the island to follow quarantine protocols as directed by our ordinance and that of the governor, the CDC, and the Rhode Island Department of Health. The governor has also issued a statewide shelter-in-place order and has closed what she defines as all non-essential businesses. That being said, many people have asked the town council to refine our ordinance to allow a modest amount of socially distanced work activity to resume. With the April 15th deadline of that ordinance nearing, we are here today to discuss the next phase of our efforts to keep our islands safe. The next item on the agenda will be to discuss and act on amending the Town of New Shoreham's COVID-10 emergency ordinance dated March 23rd, 2020. And we're going to be modifying it perhaps as prescribed in section 409B of the town charter. That being said, the current ordinance expires on April 15th, which is Wednesday. So our actions here today should include some sort of, I think should appropriately include some sort of action to deal with that deadline in any way, shape, or form if we decide to. Would anyone like to start the discussion? Chris Willie?
I just have a question. We have an actual draft amendment, don't we?
I believe there was disseminated a revised definition of shelter in place.
I guess my question, I'll be more direct, is if we have a draft, why wasn't it put on clerk base? I guess that's a legal question.
I would defer to council.
The draft
Yeah.
was sent to, oh, can you hear me? The draft was sent to all council members for review as a working draft.
Okay.
What happened after I send it is up to the council and the clerk whether or not you have to post it or you want to post it.
Okay.
That was an oversight. That was not posted.
I guess that if any draft is going to be entertained, it has to be read in its entirety.
Okay. I mean, you're sort of coming up behind it on there. It hasn't really been proposed yet, but I mean, we'll certainly do that.
Yes, that's and
Right.
I have one more question is Molly on yet?
I
I don't see her.
She's just coming.
Do we know how many emails we received for this since our last meeting about questions related to this?
I didn't take a
We
count.
have them all, don't we?
I don't know. Not everybody sends them to everybody.
No, didn't Molly make copies of them all?
I don't know.
I picked mine up yesterday. She had said that they'd be available at town hall.
Yeah,
And I
don't
got
go to
them
town
through
hall.
after, I made a call and got them after 5 o'clock last night.
Molly is with us now.
She left,
Molly,
she
there's
left them
Molly.
outside for.
Hey, Molly, how many emails did we get about this topic since the last meeting?
that was Chris Willie asking the question.
I haven't, I just joined, so are you talking about the broader agenda topic?
Any?
Yes.
Any?
I forwarded them all to you. I would say there's 15.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Ken?
Martha, go ahead.
You hear me? No, just one thing. I think everybody knows this, but I don't think you mentioned the date of the extension of the governor's shelter in place is May 8th, right?
Yeah, that's been extended, I believe. May 8th.
Right. I know you said it was extended. I don't think you put the date in. I'm sure everybody knows that, but let's just be
Okay. All right.
extra sure.
Ben Rissom?
Yeah, Ken, first of all, thanks for that review in the warden's report. I think it was very good, and I continue to be more than impressed with everybody on Block Island and how vigilant we've been, and it's obviously working. At the last meeting, and a little bit to Chris's question, I definitely brought up a subject about how, not when, but how do the island begin to shift or refine? And at that point, there were about 15 to 17 different professions, or in a class, if you want to call it that way, from mowing, et cetera, that I brought up as an example of those folks, those businesses that are in an isolated, quote unquote, condition. And I didn't feel were adding to the risk, but actually would start to bring some economy back. And I think that's what Chris is going to. I'd much rather have a discussion as to, like you said, Ken, the overall plan here. So, how do we think about refining and beginning to bring back? That's one question. The other question is when, and I believe we have all been adhering to Dr. Clark, and sort of trying to figure out what those triggers are. So in my hope is this conversation is much more about how do we begin to refine, and what is that process? Meaning, is it isolated folks first? Is it, not people that can work from home, or what are the steps one can take? That's subject number one, which I think is a policy question. The subject number two is a when question that I think is as much a medical question and policy, of course. But I think there are two separate questions that I'd love to talk here, rather than any industry or any profession, because I think it would be good if everybody can participate, and everybody can have a voice.
Okay. Thank you, Sven. Anyone want to chime in?
This is Martha again.
Go ahead, Martha.
I think it's kind of a given because people are talking about April 15th as some sort of end date. At least that's what I've been reading in emails. And I think it's really important that, I don't think there's any way this entire thing is going to be lifted April 15th. Can we just start from that premise that this is going to be in its entirety or with refinements extended well beyond that date?
Yes, Martha, I think you're right. I think that given all that's happening, the extension of the shelter in place is statewide or whatnot, I think that's definitely, we're not looking at cutting things off at April 15th in any way, shape, or form. So
I just know a lot of the emails that I read said, well, wait until April 15th, but I don't even think that's an option as far as the ordinance in its entirety, certainly. And the other thing we need to look at, I think the boat schedule changes on April 15th. Do we have any input on what they're planning on doing? Because that's the key to all of this, really.
yeah, the ferry has not the ferry has not indicated that they will be changing the schedule this week. And I would assume that if they're going to, there'd be a preliminary indication.
But I thought this schedule ended on the 15th, the one they have right now.
Right. I believe it does. Bill McComb, could you answer that?
I think on Monday we'll be addressing that, but I wouldn't expect to see much change from what we have right now.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Kathy Marola? Sorry, I see your mic is lighting up, so you must be making noise or something. Anyone want to chime in? Anyone else on the council?
We want to get to the first item on the agenda?
We've already done the first item. You want to get to the second item?
Second item, sorry.
Yeah, well, that's where we sort of are. I guess if you want, Sven, we have the revised definition as proposed. Sven, this was your proposal, I believe?
I believe so.
Okay.
But again, like I said a second ago, I think this is as much the how versus the when. So I think we need to discuss both. When, to Martha's comment, probably trumps almost anything, and that it won't necessarily be the 15th. And then at some point, if we are going to refine or shift, how do we do that? And how do you begin to do that?
Okay. Well, I mean, to give a little perspective, I guess, just to get the conversation rolling, is that we had started this back in March. And at the time, it was suggested to us by the medical community and others that we needed to get over the hump. We needed to get by the curve. We needed to beat the curve and keep things tamped down for a couple weeks at least. I think we've done a pretty darn good job of that out here. Now the question is, what do we do now that we seem to have a control to a good degree, probably not 100%, but a very good degree of the outside negative influences of the coronavirus on the island. There are still certainly ways in which it can get out here, whether by travel, but we've got quarantine in place for those coming to the island, except for essential personnel. We do have deliveries coming out of essential materials such as propane and gasoline and fuel oil and things like that. There are certain ways it can get in. There are a few cracks in the wall, but for the most part, we've pretty much got it under control. So the question is now, do we keep it? Do we stand pat for how long, or do we start to open it up a little bit in a controlled way, in a controlled manner, or do we, or something in between? So that's where I guess the conversation you're suggesting needs to go, Sven. And if someone wants to chime in on that, rather than going to the specific suggestions of revising the shelter in place at this time, we should do that. Chris, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Chris Willie.
We're having this meeting specifically to address Sven's proposal from Wednesday. That's why we scheduled this meeting. We have a draft from him for us to review. And then we have a draft from Marola if we wanted to make those changes. So what's happened in the last 3 days?
Nothing's happened in the last 3 days, but in order to, if we were to consider this definition, changing the definition of shelter in place, it would be an amendment of the ordinance of the COVID-19 ordinance of March 23rd.
All right, so if I thought we were meeting to discuss this specifically, this specific item, specific to the request, 1 to 2 people going back to work, in Sven's proposal, we have something from a mechanism to, I guess, implement it. But now it sounds like we're opening this up to a broader discussion. Am I wrong? Or are we specifically talking about the 1 to 2 person workforce right now, which is what I've been receiving over the past 3 days?
Sven, go ahead.
I think, Chris, to your question, the way the agenda item was written was broader than what I proposed. And so therefore, I think that's what Ken was talking about. I think it was really the beginning of the shift. And my proposal, just to be very clear, and I'm very happy to discuss that, my proposal was, how do we begin to, was an addendum to how to begin to think about opening up, or not opening up, that's the wrong phrase, sorry, shifting the ordinance. that didn't have any discussion around timing. So I think that a first step of refinement could be people in isolated work conditions to what I submitted and proposed at the last meeting. And that is, I think, a step in the direction. When we do that, I never talked about, and it could be a couple of weeks away. I think that's a discussion from Dr. Clark, actually.
Andre,
On the topic of what we're going to discuss today, I was under the same impression of what Chris just said. I distinctly remember at the end of our last meeting, and I think Martha made the comment, like, we should have a discussion on modification of local workers going back to work and not the whole ordinance, because it would, that we were going to discuss this component of the ordinance today, which is why we're meeting on a Saturday at 9 in the morning, and then have another meeting Monday or Tuesday to discuss the whole ordinance with what we decide on the local workforce today. That was the impression what I was discussing, thought we were discussing today. Now, I know we can continue a meeting if we want, but I don't think I'm completely prepared to discuss all the items in the emergency ordinance right now. Because I was under the impression that we were just discussing the allowing, well, Sven's proposal. That's why I thought we were all here today, whether it be when we implement it or how we implement it. I thought this discussion today was focused on just that one topic.
well, we can certainly do that. I think it would behoove us to do that if that's the impression of, and if the agenda item was too broad. It does allow us to discuss that, and anything else we want to discuss, we can always continue to another meeting. So that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we had a 3-hour meeting the other night, and I mean, I may misheard. I mean, Martha, do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, I do. And I think that, yes, we want to talk about, or I said we should not try to do the whole thing at once. I do think we have to do it in context, and we have to look at the broad, and when I began to read these emails and see the number of emails that said, wait until April 15th, and I thought, wait a minute, do people actually think this is being lifted April 15th? We've got to talk about that, because I personally don't see any way this whole ordinance is being lifted April 15th. I'm a lot more concerned than I was a week ago about, because time moves on and the weather gets better, about people, we've got to, what got lost at the last meeting, because we started after we'd been talking for 2 hours, was what on God's green earth is happening with people coming in here to work. We've got a couple of plans from a couple of employers. I think the ground is shifting all the time here, that they're not bringing people in. We've got plans from other people who say they're bringing people in on the 1st of May. And,
Yeah.
What the heck? We got to get a handle on that. And I think just from the time that we met, which was 2-3 days ago, I've lost track of time. Everything has shifted so much. And I also would like to say, as far as what we're now calling Sven's proposal, that a lot of people said, how do you cherry pick? Well, to me, it's really simple. If you're working outside, it's not the same as working inside, but that's a whole other story. But I think we have to look at the context. Everybody has to be cognizant of where we are. And can we get an input from Dr. Clark? Dr. Clark, you there?
Okay.
I am
Dr.
here.
Clark.
I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay.
So input. So what is the specific question that you have for me, Martha?
My question would be, if we're looking at beginning, because I think it's far better to go at this slowly, because if we can't wait until June and open everything up, it's going to be catastrophic if we do that. I think if we open up a couple of things and things go sour, you can pull it back pretty quickly. But as far as, and I'll go to the really obvious, easy one, is outside lawn work, which is allowed in like Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Most places allow that sort of work, and things are going to start to grow like crazy here. and that does present all kinds of other problems downstream. Is that something that you would think in a couple of weeks we could let go? Or we could let people do it?
So
with
what I would advise the
Dr. Clark, go
council.
ahead.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Now I can. I just had to identify you for those listening.
What I would advise the council from the medical perspective, the risk is extremely high still. We are still on the steep upward curve with about 200 new cases in Rhode Island a day. It is continuing to increase daily. You have protected the island, and the community has protected the island by the behaviors that were put in place through the ordinance that you enacted. In my opinion, it is way too early to begin to dismantle that. I don't think you're going to be able to do that for another 2 weeks, at least, until we see what's happening. With that said, Sven's proposal and finding sort of New England ingenuity ways of getting people to be able to do some activities that don't break the seal. So I don't know how you do that and how you're able to enact that. That's, complicated, I imagine, but the mentality would be, if there is a way to achieve that without increasing social contact and without increasing the potential for infection to arrive here from the mainland, then I'd say go for it. And you could start doing that by the end of next week. But the tricky part will be in the details, because, and the mentality, I don't think, in my opinion, the mentality should not be that we're at this point dismantling the ordinance, because we're not ready for that. And the risk to Block Island is too great. We don't have the resources. We have the elderly population. Everyone knows all the reasons. So I think finding very smart ways of select populations, putting them back to work, if you can do that, great. But in terms of the ordinance overall, I think you don't know for another really 2 weeks, I would say the end of April, before you can really begin to move on that. And that may be too early as well.
Thank you, Doctor. Chris, I see your hand up. Sven, I see your hand up. At this point, I think to get to the points you guys have raised, we should probably just, discuss the revised definition of shelter in place at this time and hammer it out and figure out if that's something we want to do now or not, based on what we've heard from the doctor and based on what everybody knows. Willie, I saw you. Chris, Willie, I saw your hand first. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to actually say, Ken, is let's focus on what this meeting was initially supposed to be about, which was about the proposal that we've seen in the past. Well, it went back longer than 2 days ago. And as far as Dr. Clark, I don't think, and no offense to Martha, I don't think it's fair for us to ask him if our policy is, I don't want to put Dr. Clark on the spot. He has given us all the advice in a professional manner, and I'm not going to ask him if somebody painting in a house is safe. That's not for him to answer. He gave us all his professional advice, and I think we should take it at that. But to put him on the spot asking if people can mow lawns or paint inside houses or shingle the side of a building, I just have a problem with it. That's on our shoulders, not Dr. Clark's. He's got enough to deal with.
Martha?
That was a much broader question, and I was simply looking for a directive, which he gave us.
All right. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, everybody says look for the medical. I asked for the medical, so don't criticize me for doing what everybody's saying to do.
Sven Rissam. Thank you, Martha.
Ken, I would look forward to discussing the refinement that we've discussed. I also would ask you that we then realize that this is in timing. So what I proposed, which was about very clearly isolate workers in isolated conditions. We talked about, just to remind everybody, and by the way, thank everybody for all the emails I got.
We're going to review. We're going to review we're going to review the proposals. Ben.
Right. But I know. But I'm just saying, workers in, one worker. The reason I proposed to shift it to 2 was about safety. Somebody falling off a roof or cutting themselves with 911 there. as soon as possible and somebody to call in. And so it was about isolated workers that cannot work from their computers. It was thought about, meaning there are many businesses on the island that I think can at least do some business on computers and be able to do some business from home. A field mower and somebody mowing the trails cannot do that from a computer at home. We never discussed timing, and my proposal was truly about what is the first shift in the ordinance. I do not want to change the ordinance, and I do not want to break the passion and the conviction and the, as Dr. Clark said, sort of the barrier that we've created. So I want to discuss this addendum, but I also want to make sure that we realize, I'm thinking at least a week from now, before we even think about enacting it. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Sven. Andre Bujo,
So I have a question for Kathy.
Councilor Marola, are you there?
Yes.
All
Go ahead.
right.
I mean, go ahead.
So this has all been discussed as a revised definition of shelter in place.
Yes.
So the governor has extended the shelter in place until May 8th. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then wouldn't we be, instead of, and I could be wrong, I'm just asking for clarification. Wouldn't we be now asking to add to essential activities or essential personnel instead of shelter in place?
The
Wouldn't
reason that I put it under shelter in place as opposed to essential activities is because we still want people coming to the island, from my understanding of the policy that the council wants to keep in effect, is we still want anyone coming to the island to quarantine for 2 weeks first. So you have to quarantine when you come to the island for 2 weeks, and then you can move into the shelter in place mode, which would allow these things to be conducted.
Right. I
If you
understand
move
that.
them to shelter, if you move them to quarantine, into essential activities, then the quarantine aspect of it would be removed.
Right, and I understand that. But if we're allowing, the movement of all, these trades, wouldn't that be an amendment to essential personnel instead of shelter in place?
Well, it depends on the policy the council wants to adopt. If the council
Okay.
wants to keep in effect the quarantine when you get to the island for 2 weeks, then they would go under essential activities. If the council wants to say, no, we still want anyone coming to the island to quarantine for 2 weeks before they go out and engage in certain activities, then they would be exceptions to shelter in place. That's why the draft says nothing shall be construed to override the self-quarantine requirements.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
yeah.
Sven Rissom.
And I think, Andre, when I originally talked about that is critical to me. I mean, we do not want to open this up to quote unquote mainland contractors. At least that's my intent.
Sven, do you have a copy of your definition, revised definition in hand?
It's on my computer and I'm afraid to get off Zoom.
All right. I guess at this point I should just read this proposed revised definition of shelter in place. Bear with me.
This is
The term
from, I'm sorry, Ken, just clarify who this is from. Is this from Kathy?
Yes, Kathy, you worked on this, right?
Yes, this is from my notes from the last meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. The term shelter in place, quote unquote, means remaining at your residence except for essential activities. However, people may leave their residences to conduct the following activities regardless of whether they are essential activities. A, outside activities. People may engage in outside activities such as walks and exercise, but social distancing must be maintained and the CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines must be followed. B, work activities. People may engage in the following work activities: construction, plumbing, electrical work, site development, landscaping, mowing, farming, painting, foundation installation, septic removal or installation, building repair, paving, remodeling, heating and cooling repair and installation, provided, however, that these work activities may only be conducted under the following conditions. And remember, this is a proposal. I'm not reading what the ordinance has been changed to. I'm just reading a proposal at this point, if someone's joining us late. These work activities may only be conducted under the following conditions. The first one is no more than 2 people may be present at any job site, regardless of the type of work being performed. Workers must wear masks. Workers may not travel to and from the job site together. Workers may not share tools. And workers must maintain social distancing, and CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines must be followed. Nothing contained in this subparagraph B shall be construed to override the self-quarantine requirements of paragraph 9. The following sentences of paragraph 9 will need to be stricken. Visitors who are not allowed in essential activities shall leave the island and follow CDC and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines. And also, only skeleton crews will be permitted to enter construction sites for the remainder of the effective period of this emergency ordinance, and such entry shall be limited to what is necessary to ensure safety and security. Those 2 items will need to be stricken in order to have the previous 2 items added. So that is the proposal that we have a draft of in front of us that we can now discuss and hash out. Chris Willie.
Ken, I think you skipped one that's important, is about the daily logbook.
Not
Ken?
on my draft.
So
Ken?
I'll read it. It just says workers must maintain a daily log of personal contacts. That's actually something the state's the governor's asking everybody to do.
Right.
But that's as important, because that's God forbid you do get a positive case, you're going to have to be able to produce a logbook.
Yeah.
Ken? Jim Kern?
Jim, go ahead.
I think you may be working off a slightly different version than the one Chris and I are reading. I counted 3 things that were in the one I have, and I think they should be mentioned, and I'll read them slowly so people can make notes if they need to. Number 1 in the list, before no more than 2 people may be present at a job site. Number 1 was prior to working on a job site, a worker must initially inform, and Councilor Marola wrote it as TBD. I would say if the council makes this policy change, we have a plan to identify who that person would be. So that's number 1.
Yep.
Number three, you read as workers must wear a face mask. It also goes on to say, and I think it's good, and have hand washing and or hand sanitizer readily available on the site.
Yeah,
Just washing and sanitizer.
Yeah, I have a copy of that now, Jim. Thank you. Yep. And then the other one
All
was
right.
changes in work activity.
And then the one Chris read, and I just wanted to add a couple of things. And we may want to do it later, and I don't think we want to go in 50 different directions, but as the council considers this and during the discussion, this would be a good time for people to communicate to Molly through the email anything that's on the edge or in the gray area, because if it's in the next 72 hours or whatever, if this change is made, we want to do our best to be able to answer questions in the gray area. And I have 2. One is appliance repair. Another is, I called it communication network repair, which is essentially people's internet and satellite and that. So as I think, well, maybe everybody doesn't know, but we get a good number of questions just asking, is this in, is this out? And it's usually followed by a justification for why it's important. So those are 2 I have. If anybody else has some, now is the time to do it so we can make it as clear as possible. Obviously, we don't want to have 500 things in this list, but if we can keep it reasonable, I think that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I also point out that under work activities, we had commercial fishing, lobstering, and shellfishing added in under section B. I think also I don't want to muddy the water too much, but we should probably probably have some comment in there or make some indication in there about the protocols with delivery trucks to the island and make sure those are included in the social distancing and CDC guidelines, as you were mentioning, Jim. Go ahead, Chris Willie.
Has this been cross-referenced with the state's list? I just want to make sure that there isn't anything that's not on the state list. For
Yes, it's
essential, I'm sorry.
Kathy Marola?
Yeah, this has been, but it's a working draft, so I'm going to do the final one. We'll go through the most, because she just issued another order yesterday. So before the final one comes out, I'm going to compare it against all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Mick,
Andre Pedro?
do we have veterinary services on that list? Is it covered under something?
Not at this point.
All right.
Good suggestion, though.
Yeah.
Can Andre, can you clarify emergency or just like regular, like dog grooming, or is it just veterinary? Like, can you clarify for me?
I would say veterinary services wouldn't fall into grooming.
Right, right. That's why I want to know. Like,
Yeah, medical. You're talking about medical services.
okay, yeah.
I like veterinary. I think that's a great ad.
Yeah, veterinary services. And to get back to what was Jim, what did you say? Appliance repair?
Yeah, appliance repair and also telecommunications.
Those were the two. Those were the two I added, Andre. I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody doesn't have a stove or a refrigerator that's working, that's a problem.
Right. Wouldn't that fall under the emergency, under an emergency? Because I mean, I had to have the gas guy come this week myself because it was my stove was leaking gas. So he came and fixed it. Because of kind of an emergency.
At some point, as I said, I think it starts to get to gray area. And I think people have been I know people have been put in a position to assess this on the spot, which is to say our police department, me, others, is coming out and fixing telecommunications equipment in emergency. You could argue yes, you could argue no. So, and I think appliances are similar. I think, Andre, in some cases it's clear it's an emergency. In some cases it gets a little bit more gray. So I wanted to put it on the list of things to consider.
Well, yeah, as long as it's appliance repair and not like installing kitchens,
Right.
installing,
Right.
But I would think,
Agreed.
and can you clarify, thanks for bringing up this, the communications with like the satellites and direct TVs. I think I remember back at one of our meetings, probably the first or second meeting, Lars stood up and said, I got to get the news out. I need to go to my office, and that was okay. I think we deemed it okay for Lars to be able to go to his office. So wouldn't that kind of fall into that also? Or do we really need to spell these out is what I'm asking. I mean, I think we do, but I'm not sure that some of this already wasn't included earlier.
And my answer to that is we have had specific questions I have on these two categories where I have had a hard time identifying whether it's in or out. And so I would ask, I don't, as I said, I don't want to add 20 new categories, but I think these two, as I said, I think there's some cases where it's obvious. There's some cases where it's less obvious, and virtually everybody has both of those. So I don't think it comes under electrical. And Lars is a different deal. He's media. He's getting to hundreds or thousands of people. We're talking about kind of personal telecommunications equipment, and that's why I suggested it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ben Rissom.
I think the appliance one, I'm with Andre and I think everybody else that if somebody's stove is leaking gas or something doesn't work. I was surprised the other day. I was talking to Kathy Marola and I said, well, if the furnace goes out, I can call the furnace repairman and service. And she said, no, that's not an essential activity. It's service of furnace repair. And I was surprised. Kathy, is that true? And how to Andre and Jim's comments, how do we make sort of repair of what we'll call essential home goods? How do we make that included?
So what you have done in your original emergency ordinance is make a list of things that the council considered to be essential activities. Those activities can be conducted regardless of the quarantine requirements. So in paragraph 9 of the ordinance as it exists right now, you have a list of what the council considered to be essential activities. And that original list was put together with the idea that as we live with this ordinance, we were going to need to tweak it. So that's where the things that now you're talking about in terms of emergency, that's where those would come in. So if you want to include essential activities as, you know, repair of this, delivery of that, those are going to be policy decisions the council has to make to extend the definition of essential activities. The key is, the difference is, an essential activity can be conducted without the quarantine requirements first. So you can have people coming off island for that.
Ken?
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, this came up at, I think, the first meeting we had, and my question was, if my boiler went out, I don't have hot water. And the response I got across the board was that, you know, that's common sense. Of course you have to have hot water, and that's health, safety, and welfare. And that's, which I think is a perfectly reasonable response. If your gas is leaking, for heaven's sakes, that's health, safety, and welfare. There has to be some common sense in here. This is just getting silly.
Yeah, I know.
If something has to, if you've got, well, those are the examples. But we talked about this already. I thought this was done and resolved.
I thought so too, because at the first meeting, I believe you brought up that you had boiler problems, and
No, I
everybody-
don't have boiler problems. That's why I brought it up, because I don't. Thank you, God, right now. But if
Right, and that's why public safety is the first one under essential activities. And we also
And
have
he-
purchase of propane and heating oil as an essential
Yeah, but-
activity.
But my point was, it was deemed that if, particularly if you, back then it was still kind of cold, but back, if you didn't have hot water, everybody's being told, wash your hands with hot water. My hot water runs off my boiler goes out. That's health, safety, and welfare. You don't need to put it, you know, let Jeff Coles come to Martha Ball's house, for God's sake.
So if you want to expand and add to essential activities, so the bottom line is the council is going to need to decide what things they want to consider to be essential activities and what kind of activities they want to consider to be part of the exceptions to shelter in place.
And Ken, if I could, it sounds to me like the two that I listed.
Go ahead,
would be
Jim.
considered it. The two that I listed would be considered included in the essential activities as long as they were repaired, and we can leave it at that.
Sven, go ahead.
But I think through the discussion we just had, I think there would be a good, if we can do it where it's a repair or a service of quote unquote essential activities. For example, Jeff Cole's coming. I just think it would be nice to have a broader thing than have to pinpoint every single activity.
Molly Fitzpatrick, do you have some input for us?
I do. I've received several emails. I'll just read them to you. The first one's from Darren K. Vest. He says, "Hi, I understand selling food for takeout only is defined as an essential activity. It would seem to follow that shop owners should be allowed to work in their shops to prepare the shops to sell food for takeout only. Can you please confirm owners can personally work in their shops, including construction, meeting, building department, and permitting requirements to prepare the shop to sell takeout food only? Thank you." The second one is A suggestion from Phillips Real Estate, how about people in an office be added? We have one from Roberta McCormick, who asks, cleaning empty houses only. Here's one from John Spear. He says, I understand the intent, but it needs to be made clear that people permitted to work via this amendment need to be either residents or have been here for 2 weeks and quarantined and are not allowed to leave the island and return. From Christine Greeley, she says, I'm writing in reference to the question of allowing individual residents to work by themselves during the crisis. There was a strong proposal from council members to allow only particular contractors to work by themselves or with a buddy. This list included plumbers, painters, carpenters, and people who mow lawns. The proposal made it clear that those working in an office setting would not be included. As you know, I've supported individual residents to work by themselves outside of their homes as long as they take precautions and don't interact with the public. The difficulty with the proposal is revealed when you identify who holds those positions allowed and who is prohibited. The allowed activities are done primarily by men in this community, and those working in offices are primarily done by women on the island. As much as I would like to see individuals working, if they do not put us at a risk, it is very important not to discriminate against a protected class. Lifting the ban should be applied to everyone who can work by themselves or not at all. I have another one from Jill Kirby Seppo, who says, who suggests that the ordinance should include symptoms that no one who is sneezing can go to work, etc. And I have another one that just came in. I have to read it off my screen. Gail Ballard Hall wants clarification on moving vans, whether a moving van can come off the island, go to a property, and get right back on the boat.
Thank you, Molly.
And I actually have one more. My email's kind of exploding. I have one more. I have to read it if you give me a sec. Never mind, it was just procedural.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris Willie.
It's a question for Kathy regarding the quarantine. Can you just, I didn't quite understand the explanation for quarantine. If somebody is an essential service, does that mean they don't have to quarantine?
As the ordinance exists right now, that is correct.
So that's, all right, I don't agree with that.
Well,
Andre.
I know, and that's why I tried to keep this focused early when I said, we were here to discuss the workers today. That's something I also, because I think, essential personnel, this whole thing about, essential personnel are coming from other places, and I'm starting to see, this, oh, well, they're essentials, and that kind of ends the discussion right there with, so yeah, I do want to have another discussion on that. I just don't want to have it now, because today we need to stay focused on
Thank you.
the Sven's proposal that seems to be turning into a Sven's can of worms. So, I'd like to keep the discussion, like we said, strictly to this proposal about workers going back to work, because like I said, I do have issues with this shelter in place and who's moving around and who's not. And, but that's not, I didn't think we were going to do that today. So that's my thoughts on this right now.
Okay. Chris Willie.
Sorry, no, that's just my icon. I'm good. Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
So, to get us back on track, to get us back on track with this proposal that we have in front of us from Kathy, what's everyone's thoughts?
I think if I could chime in, I think as far as the work activities go, I mean, I'm like I said, this is just talking about if this was going to happen. I'd want to make sure that the farming would include agriculture. I mean, maybe it's a little more broad, but any agriculture activities, and that I think there needs to be some sort of a agreed on arbitrator, if you will, at the town level, who will be the person to answer the questions about what can and can't be done, rather than have one answer coming from a dispatcher, another answer coming from a town clerk, another answer coming from an opinion of a town council member. I think we need to have a clear definition of where the answers of what can and can't be done are gonna be disseminated through on that.
I know, but I'm trying to keep this focused now to the revised definition of shelter in place. And
Right.
again, we can go on a tangent on that because, and I agree with that. And I think the ultimate authority should lie with our attorney, because she's the one that's going to have to defend this if anybody has a problem with it. And I think a phone call to Kathy, she's been available. I don't know if she wants to be more available on a widespread, more people calling. But every time I've had a question about that, I've reached out to her and I've gotten an answer pretty much immediately. So I agree that, there should be that person, but I think it should be our attorney.
Okay.
So, all right. So I want to go back to the revised definition of shelter in place. Sven mentioned that, he'd like to see this possibly, be instituted or start to be instituted in the next week.
I'm not sure I said that. I said didn't set a timing.
You did say next week. You did, like 5 minutes ago, you said next week. However,
In a
it's
week.
okay.
Yeah.
A week. You said a week. So, but before that, I heard the doctor 2 weeks. So I'm going to continue to listen to my doctor and the healthcare professionals. Sorry, Dr. Clark, you're on the line here, but you're not the only one. You're not the only one saying that. You're not the only one that just gave out all that information. I mean, that information is coming from, every news outlet that we can, consume, if anybody's consuming it. But, I know we got to get people back to work. But looking at upward slopes, looking at problems in Connecticut, looking at problems in Massachusetts, looking at, none of this is peaking and none of this is leveling out. And this is what has guided my decisions through this whole process. And I'm not going to change that now. So if my healthcare professionals and the governor even is saying end of April, that's where my decision is going to fall right now. So I know there are a lot of, people that want to get back to work, and we've gotten a lot of letters, but I am looking at my stack and I'm not going to read them all. Molly just read a few from people. We have a lot more than that. But what I'm seeing the pattern right now is the people who don't want us to relax these rules are basically coming from the young families on Block Island, and a lot of them are in the construction trades. So, we sit here and we always say, and it's almost like a cliche, more people need to be involved. The young people need to be involved. Well, the young people are screaming at us right now. And that, you have that all in your emails. So if we don't listen to the young people of this island, who are the future of this island, then I don't know we're just hypocrites. So I'm listening to that. I do have a lot more from them than I do have from opening it up. And I agree with, I have the list here of what we have been heard from people, and it's basically open it up to locals only, open it up to all, keep it closed, listen to the doctor. Listen to the doctor is a very popular, sentiment right now in these emails. And then, like Christine Greeley says, you can't open it up to all and not pick and choose who you're going to open it up to. But we do have a letter or 2 letters from contractors who posed the question of, I have a crew of 4 or 5 people. I have a large crew. And how am I going to decide who to put back to work and who to put not back to work? Do I decide to put one guy part-time, another guy part-time, some full-time? And this, and these are the decisions that we're making these contractors face. And I know that we are going to have to do this in a slow and deliberate and thoughtful manner, but we are asking contractors to pick who they put back to work. And I don't think that's been part of the discussion right now. And that's a burden for a contractor. I know that 4 crews of 4 or 5 are probably way out right now, and 1 or 2, but I think that needs to be taken into consideration as we discuss this, of putting that burden on the contractors. So that's all I have to say right now until the next time I have to say something.
Ken?
Thank you, Andre. Martha, hold on a second. Sven, go ahead.
It's okay. Go ahead, Martha. That's fine.
Go ahead, Martha.
I wanted to go back to something. I had my mute button on. I thought the ultimate arbitrator of this was not, whoever member of the council you think is sympathetic to you. I thought we tried to do this in the beginning. We have a town manager council form of government. Shouldn't these questions be going to the manager? And I suggested this in the beginning. Nobody wanted to go along with it, with consultation with the first warden, because we have an interim town manager and the first warden has a better feel of the land. And if we start doing this person's answering this question, that person's answer, which apparently is going on. I didn't realize that. I thought we had a structure set up. What the heck is going on? Who's answering what here? Is this just a free-for-all? We have a structure. We have a form of government, we have a charter. Use it, for pity's sake.
I can answer, Ken.
Thank you, Martha. Jim Kern.
Thank you.
Quickly, I think there have been moments where it has felt like it has been very spread out. The questions come into a lot of different places, dispatch, police officers standing at the boat. But generally speaking, they've either made it to me, they come into the town clerk's office, they make it to me. We really have had a pretty centralized, and Ken has been involved. Obviously, there's times where I've had to talk to him because I just have to. And there are times where it's gotten to the town solicitor. So and as we go through this, that's a process that's going to have to be adjusted as necessary. But I wouldn't even list that on our list of issues or problems so far. And it hasn't, for such extraordinary set of circumstances, it hasn't been outside what I would have expected. And I think that's very manageable. I think the more difficult thing is, and it always is, trying to identify where the boundaries, where the out of bounds lines are, so we can make the call. And that's we're working through that too. And that's why I brought up a couple of categories. Quickly on some other comments, I think what I heard the doctor say was that and I say this to make the distinction. What I heard him say was, let's not commingle 2 things. Let's not, as we talk about maybe trying to get local people back to work, let's not mingle that in with opening up the floodgates. So we can have a conversation about letting the local people back to work within the context of essentially staying where we are. And I would add, lastly, just for your consideration, that under the present restrictions put in place by Governor Raimondo, most, if not all, of the categories listed in the proposal being considered are allowed and have been allowed, and that is also consistent. She has extended the shelter in place or stay in place, quarantine, et cetera, to May 8th. In other words, we still want to stay in that status, if you will, kind of the highest threat level status. But within that, if it is the judgment of the governing body, within that, is there a way where you can put people back to work without significantly increasing the threat of spread, which is what I heard the doctor say, then that's something that can be reasonably considered. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Sven Rissom.
Just to keep on task, and I'm definitely very happy with the end of April, if that's the timing that everybody wants. Again, I'm much more interested in this first phase. I hear a lot of, we've all received a lot of emails, and thank everybody for writing them regarding real estate offices, moving vans, etc. I do think this is about local folks working. I tried, just so everybody's clear, in the proposed addendum, my intent was for those people that could work in computers or potentially do some of their work at home, bookkeepers, etc. Shelter in place, the way it's currently written, I think allows a lot of that work to happen versus somebody mowing of the nature trails. And so that was how I originally sort of separated out things in an attempt to make small steps. I'm very comfortable. The council will vote on timing. And to Andre's point, end of April, or timing is a medical decision. So I go with Dr. Clark. But the intent was for those people that can't do some work at home, how do we open it to them? And I just wanted to clarify and correct on timing, or adjust on timing to Andre's comment. Thank you.
Well, in reference to the letter we got concerning the discrimination, alleged discrimination that might occur if we were to do things the way we're proposed. I mean, there's a big difference between two guys working in opposite ends of a house and a couple people sitting in a small office area. We've seen the projections and the studies that have been done about someone sneezing in a grocery store and it going over to the next aisle and that sort of thing. So it's not, and it's certainly not intended to be discriminatory. It's just a matter of practicality and in terms of work environment and that sort of thing. What's been a resounding or repeating theme is you can have two people walking on the street. You can have one person walking on the street getting exercise and whatnot, but you can't have one person working alone at a job site. Why not? Where's the danger in that? So that's, I think, what part of the consideration is, and to keep it limited, and maybe it's a matter of small steps. It's opening up a little bit at a time, kind of like what the governor did, only in reverse. And the point is well taken that a lot of these activities are still being conducted on the mainland. We have to remember that we are in a unique situation. We're in a special situation, is what we've achieved here. I'm sure we're almost unique in terms of our population, in terms of what we've been able to do in protecting the population. And for that reason, that some comparisons and some concerns are valid, but some may not be completely. A lot of the spike we're seeing on the mainland, in Rhode Island anyway, the deaths we're seeing, a majority of them are occurring in nursing homes, unfortunately. But obviously other places like the metropolitan area are seeing, major spikes and deaths occurring at an alarming rate. They're starting to plateau a little bit, but that's a unique situation. That's not happening here. So we need to take that into account also in the consideration. Chris Willie.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remind people when this ordinance was passed, I think the focus was stemming the flow of traffic to the island and around the island. And as we, if you want to turn the spigot open a little bit at a time, that still has to be kept in mind, because as activity increases on the island over the coming weeks, so will the activity of things coming and people coming to the island. So that has to be, taken into consideration. But I think people lose sight of why we did this to begin with. And that wasn't to keep people from working. The mechanism that we needed to employ because of where we are, to your point, Ken, we're unique, is because we're basically an enclosed ecosystem, for lack of a better word, 10 miles in the middle of, 13 miles out in the Atlantic, that if we get struck with a mini pandemic, if you would, we don't have the medical services to accommodate it. And it's going to create more problems for an economy that relies not only on the construction trade, but also the tourism trade and other small trades. So we took a very cautious approach. And so when we move forward, I think we still need to be cautious, because that environment hasn't changed. We're still an island, and we are still an island with very, a fragile although good, but a fragile medical services. So I've had numerous discussions with people that feel as though they were singled out when certain activities are allowed on the mainland, but not here. And I have to remind them that this was more to stem the flow of traffic, in my eyes anyway, to the island. And I think we have done a very good job in that. And as we move forward, we still need to keep that in mind as these drafts are considered and changes to the ordinance are considered.
Thank you, Chris. Senator Islam?
Very briefly, the intent of the addendum was about local workers in isolated conditions, not necessarily opening up the spigot per se, but rather keeping our ecosystem, I like that word, our little ecosystem contained, just to clarify. That was the intent.
Thank you, Sven.
Hey, Ken?
Hey, Martha.
Hi. This is something that came up in the third hour of our last meeting, and it really is concerning me a lot. It's about bringing essential people coming over, like for the example that was given, and it was given before, so I'll use it again. A plumber to open the National. That's really frightening me. The idea that we will have all of these quote essential unquote people coming over to do that kind of work, and I'm a lot more worried about that than anything else at this point. And I think this is basically what Chris is talking about, where we were all. I think what we were all trying to say, we can't just drop the dome, which I think we'd all like to, and let a little hole in for the boat to come through with groceries. But how do we maintain this, and how do we stop? How do we continue to stem this flow? And it's from the mainland that we're worried about. At least I'm worried about.
Right. Well, that's why at the very least we'd want to have rules in place that the CDC and Department of Health guidelines must be, and social distancing must be maintained if that type of personnel were allowed to come over here. And obviously they would not be allowed to do so and wander around freely. They'd be coming for a specific purpose, and once that purpose was done, they would be quarantined on site. And once that purpose was done, they would leave. So.
Okay, I said that because it sounded a lot more open-ended at our last meeting, and I was a little worried. I'm very worried about that.
Okay, Chris Willie?
Yeah, Martha, it's a valid worry. And I think we've received some proposals, I think you mentioned earlier, from some of the businesses after that comment was made. And I think give Andre and I don't know, 36 hours I think it's important to get feedback from everybody. We already got feedback from some of the bigger establishments, but your concern is valid. I do know that some of these businesses anticipate opening up Memorial Day, and I just think that's just a pie in the sky at this juncture. That's my personal opinion, though. I don't think that's, never mind opening up, but are you going to have anybody here to fill your seats or your whatever? But we're planning on reaching out to some of the businesses, all the businesses at some point here in the next week, and to address that concern, Martha, and you'll be filled in as this goes along and participating as well. Because we need a timeline, and this timeline is evolving every day. And, is that May 8th going to get extended? Very likely. And what impact is that going to have on the businesses out here that need a workforce when it does come time to open? And is that workforce going to be at full strength or half strength? Those are things that we need to know so we can, as we move with this ordinance and making changes, that we can do it intelligently, safely, and at the same time, not killing anybody's business as a side effect.
Andre
Yes,
Bujo?
thanks.
Andre?
So we're discussing a revised definition of shelter in place here today. So can we get focused on that? Because we've already been at this for an hour and a half. Where are we with our revised definition of shelter in place?
It sounds like we have a proposal on the table, a suggestion on the table. You need to decide if it's something you want to do and when you want to do it, if you want to do it at all. Sorry, you can't see my hands.
And if I can just chime in, I know we've had other adds to this. Jim mentioned some, Ken mentioned some, for example, aquaculture, agriculture, things like that. So I do think that the final list will get refined, but it is close to the original. And the original did not have timing. So I think then the question gets to be, do we say timing is, end of April or early May or whenever? Because I think those are two different subjects, timing and how.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we have a revised definition of shelter in place that we're discussing, and things have been added. And I know Jim had sent an email about, prior to working on a job site, a worker must initially inform to be determined. That's being discussed. I think this revised definition of shelter in place is fine. I think we agree that it's not prudent to send it out to take action on, to initiate it this week. So I think I would make a proposal to digest what we've been discussing here with the means of communication, with adding people to like veterinarians and certain other people, emergency appliance repair. I'm fine with the way this reads right now, but I know we've discussed things to add to it. So do we want to continue this meeting until maybe Monday or Tuesday? So we can have something in place for when our ordinance expires on Wednesday. Do we have anything else we need to discuss pertaining to shelter in place?
I'm sorry, Martha, did you have a comment?
Well, my only comment goes back to what I said before about health and welfare, that there were things like I had a conversation with someone yesterday and we didn't agree on this, that they thought, exterminator from the mainland was not essential. And I don't have an exterminator, but I certainly think, somebody coming out to get rid of the rodents is certainly health and safety. Clearly, not everybody agrees with me on that, which baffles me. But of course, I'm baffled if people don't agree with me on everything. So I don't know if we can have a list that includes everybody. That's my concern. That there still has to be this fallback of. Somebody asked me if they could walk their dog, or have a dog walker come in, and I that's just to me that was such an obvious thing. You didn't have to go to the attorney to ask about it. But I hate listing everything because you're going to miss something, and that's like thanking everybody. You always leave a name out and you have to write a second letter. There's just got to be some kind of catch-all provision. And also remodeling is in here, which I think kind of got slipped in. It looks like an awfully big item to be in there
Okay.
I'm sorry.
when we're trying to do minimal work.
Chris Willie? Chris
I'm
Willie?
sorry. Can I go back?
Oh, hold on.
I agree with Andre as far as, we have input from everybody, including the public. Kathy can revise this. My only concern, again, with revising this and then we publish a list is, again, essential employees and the definition of quarantine. And, our intent is I just don't want to I see that as a weak link, and I don't know how to address it. I'm just saying, we're revising a shelter in place definition and listing essential employees. And if you're essential on that list, where's the line drawn? Does it mean you can't come over, do work and then go back on the same day? I don't know. That's my concern, specifically with the quarantine definition.
Sven?
I think Ken, I think those are great questions, and I actually agree with Chris on all of them. I think that's a great discussion for Tuesday, trying to draw this back to Andre and focus, Andre's comments and focus. I think if Kathy can revise based on everything she's heard today, the current addendum, and if you guys want to put timing in, we can for the end of April, or just leave it out for a minute. But I think things like quarantine and definitions are a good subject for Tuesday. My question to the group is, should we ask Kathy to have any statement in there, or maybe it's a non-written statement, that Jim and Ken are arbitrators or are the deciders of, definition of an activity, or to Andre's point, Kathy Marola could be. I think, I don't know when we put that in, but I think we should make sure that it's very clear that it's not 5 individuals and a town manager who are deciding this. We have a clear process.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the word is interpreter. I'm not, maybe
Yeah,
not.
interpreting, a great word.
Just so it's clear. Yeah, and you're right, the process, it is the town manager who is to enforce the ordinances as dictated by the council. Andre, do you have something? Andre?
No.
I thought you were waving.
I don't know. I may have been. Not at you.
You had said you had said you were going to make a proposal, but are you trying to make? Were you thinking of making a motion?
A motion to continue until, well, do we want to set our meeting for Monday, Tuesday, or?
We can't set a regular meeting without 24 hours. I mean, without 48 hours notice. And that
No,
Can't
continue.
we continue?
We can't do a meeting without 48 hours notice if it's a regular meeting. We can
But we-
continue the meeting if you want to, but that's the way it goes. Martha, go ahead. Thank you.
No, it's the same thing about continuing, because we'll be talking about, this is a broad enough agenda to cover it all, isn't it?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
And so the question is, do we want to meet Monday or Tuesday? That's what I said. Do we want to continue till Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
And in the meantime, let's take on the work activities and include office people and, take the input that we've gotten.
Well, I just want to make a point that we can, it's all good in politics to talk about the input we've gotten, but we represent everybody, whether they talk to us or not. Let's remember that. That's how government's set up.
Tuesday. I'll make a motion to continue this meeting until Tuesday.
Second.
Do we want the time?
Second or third?
Yeah, motion by Andre to continue this meeting until Tuesday at such time is what?
What time is good for everybody? I mean, do we need to set a time right now?
Yes. Just
Yes.
Martha?
3 o'clock.
Can I chime in on that? This is Kathy.
Go ahead,
Yep.
Catherine.
Since the ordinance expires on Wednesday, and it sounds like there's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of revisions, just in terms of the time available, I think it might be better if it was in the morning.
Or do you
Or on
want to do
Monday.
Monday?
We
Or
can do
later on Monday, maybe?
Yeah,
Monday at 3?
Yeah, okay. Is that amendment to your motion, Andre?
I'll make a new amendment, a new motion to continue this meeting until Monday. I don't know the exact date of that, at 3 p.m.
That's
And I'll
amended. Andre's
amend my second.
And then the second, Chris is seconding the amendment to the motion. Any further discussion?
I just wanted, yeah, okay, no, all good.
Okay. Catherine?
Well,
did you have anything?
I wanted to see if Molly had any more emails that came in during our meeting that should be read for input. Fiona? Molly? She's muted.
Molly, you there?
She's muted.
Now she's not. Oh, now she's not.
Thanks for asking. There was one more, if you can hold on for just a second.
No, I'd be happy to.
it was redundant with some of the comments that you've had before. It was to
All right.
add commercial shellfishing.
Okay, Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, whatever we got was heard.
Catherine Marola, do you have enough information?
I just need a point of clarification here. Am I submitting a supplemental proposed amended ordinance, which includes delivery trucks, veterinary, agriculture, and appliance repair to the work activities permitted in shelter in place?
I think, can I answer that? I think yes on that, but I don't think that's an exhaustive list. I think that maybe things might come up between now and then that we might have to add to that to discuss.
Sure, I just want to know what you need right now. And those are the 4 items that I had written down. I want to make sure I had all of them.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Well, I mean,
Chris?
Kathy, you heard my comment about the quarantine and essential employee, right?
Right, and the shelter, by including it in shelter in place, that does not get rid of the quarantine requirement. That's why it's in shelter in place. You still, if you come to the island, have to quarantine for 14 days before you can move into shelter in place. You can't do these activities if you come to the island until you've quarantined for 14 days.
Okay, I'll email you some questions and scenarios because this has kind of been a
There's one
recurring theme.
There's one
Okay.
obvious one, Chris, if I could, there's one obvious one. And that is, when we say, if you come to the island, you have to quarantine for 14 days. That means if you're coming to the island for 14 days or 15 days or 30 days, you have to quarantine for the first 14 days. But if you're coming to the island for whatever reason, for 3 days, you quarantine. And then if you need to leave the island for whatever reason, you can leave the island. But as long as you stay quarantined while you're here, and there's been some confusion about that. That's one of the questions that's come up. So, for instance, if someone's selling their house and they want to come to the island to empty out their belongings, yes, they have to quarantine, but they don't have to stay here for 14 days and then leave. They can quarantine, empty their house, and then leave. That's my understanding. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think maybe the quarantine term, or I think Jim suggested, because we posed a couple of scenarios over the past week about, lumber deliveries. Well, I didn't think lumber deliveries should have been happening. And I know one company, I guess the word would be voluntarily canceled its deliveries until we move forward with some type of amendment, but not all the companies did. And the term of self-isolation, I guess, for any deliveries, whether it's food, lumber, whatever, has to, again, that's kind of common sense. Same thing with homeowners. Homeowners have been told they cannot come out to get their stuff and leave the same day. We're getting into very specific scenarios, which I will forward to Kathy, but when we're not, this is, obviously there isn't going to be a perfect solution for all of this, but having that 1 or 2 people in consult with our attorney to answer these questions, I think is critical. I've tried to forward everything to Jim, or you can. So I think stay that course, because you would both consult with Kathy if you didn't have an answer. But I think I will get as many of these questions I had directly to Kathy specific to shelter in place, self-isolation, and quarantine as I can, just so she can at least look at them while she's drafting this.
Okay. Molly, did you have something?
I did. I had a couple of additional emails came in. One was from Darren Vest. I read his email first about the selling food and the workers that kind of the backup workers that need to come out in order to open a restaurant, including construction, etc. He said, hi, is it possible to get answers today to the submitted questions? And the second one was from Gail Hall, and I think you've been discussing it. Like to discuss what the police dispatch is telling homeowners when they come. And this is a little bit about, it's evident that homeowners are coming for less than 2 weeks, but when someone calls the police dispatch, they are told that they can only come for 2 weeks. And that's a question of the quarantine that you've been discussing.
Yeah,
and I
we talked
covered
about
it.
that, yeah.
And then a letter, email from Margie Cummings. She says, "Hi, any workers should have resided on BI for the last 14 days or have sheltered in place for 14 days on BI or as essential worker. And keep list of essential workers very, very short. I want to severely limit people coming over here." Again, things that you've been discussing during the meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Sven, here's some.
I also received just a note that if we can figure out how to make the amended addendum available to the public, people would like to see it prior to the meeting that we're going to be discussing it. So that
Yeah,
would be helpful.
got it. Any further comments on the motion on the table?
No.
All right, as I'll restate the motion, is that to continue this meeting on Monday at 3 o'clock for continued discussion and to of the revised definition and to discuss and to continue this item on the agenda till 3 o'clock on Monday. All those in favor, Andre,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Sven,
I
Martha? Martha?
She's cutting her grass.
Martha?
I don't see her on the list.
Are you there, Martha?
We have 4.
A little cup of horrors going on down there.
Martha, we will wait until we have Martha on the line so she may vote on this.
She's on.
They
I
just
see her.
unmuted me. I've been on for a while.
Thank you,
I
Martha.
was unmuted. They muted me again.
Did you vote? Martha?
Did I vote?
No.
Whatever, yes, yes.
All right, I vote aye also. Motion carries. Any further comments?
Happy Easter.
a beautiful day.
Monday at 3.
Motion to
Are
adjourn.
you going to
Okay.
send out the same kind of notice?
One person at a time. Who asked me a question?
Well, Sven has a question. I had a couple of comments that were unrelated.
Sven?
I just want to clarify and make sure that the same kind of note is going to go out for Monday's meeting, because I thought that was very helpful with the links and all the phone-in numbers. So if that can go from Michelle, that was very helpful.
Thank you. Martha?
Just a couple of things I didn't get to you beforehand. I think most people may already know this, but former police chief Paul Riker has passed away, and that should be noted. And if anyone has any questions, the Harbor Church is holding a sunrise service on Indian Head Neck, and everybody's staying in their cars and keeping apart, and it's all very structured. So if you get calls about cars on Indian Head Neck at sunrise on Easter, it's all being done in the way it's supposed to be.
Thank you, Martha. Yes, I hadn't heard about that till a few minutes before the meeting, and we were saddened to hear Paul Riker's passing, former police chief out here. He did a lot for the community. The Rikers did while they were here. So we certainly offer our condolences to the family, and we have fond memories of their presence on the island when they were here. Thank you, Martha. Meeting adjourned.
Second.
We already voted on it. Thank
We
you.
did. Thank you.
Third.